Yeah, my guys. Hey,
It's
we're
good,
on.
fellas.
It's good to
How
be
y'all
here,
doing?
Yes,
bro.
sir.
Thank you, man.
Feeling like I look.
Hey,
All
man,
right,
great.
How do I look?
I see that fresh
Great.
cut. V got you right though.
Man, I did this myself.
Come
brother.
on.
This right
You
here,
got
this
the
ain't nothing but
fresh
Xavier
Italian
special.
made Chelsea's on
Don't
too,
even
bro.
talk. Don't
Oh,
even
man.
talk.
Right.
Don't even talk with them.
And you know it's
Come on,
quarantine,
bro.
bro.
And look at the
We gotta
Killmonger
step out when we
glasses,
can.
too,
Those
bro.
people say,
Yeah,
hey,
the
he got some
Killmonger.
nice ones. Those not even ones. This man came through flexing.
Yeah, it's on.
It's on?
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, I got to get all up on it. Okay.
Man. Fellas, I appreciate you. It's from the bottom of my heart, man, to be able to have a conversation with my guys that are doing incredible things and in the midst of the times. I mean, it took a lot for us to even get here. The COVID tests, just the schedule change. We wanted to have, we wanted to have a whole panel in here, man, and wanted to have the audience in the background. But of course, man, I appreciate y'all's willingness to just be here and pivot alongside us so we can have this really important conversation. As we get started, I do want to do a little bit of a background, right? The why. Of course, we understand the times. We've all been living in 2020. In the midst of the times, this year has brought along a global pandemic that has exacerbated health disparities in this country and in this world. Over 200,000 people have died. Poverty that was already a problem pre-COVID has been exacerbated. Social unrest, streets full, people that are coming out for the first time, businesses that are coming out for the first time and saying enough is enough. Yes, we had another election and we have a new president, but when I was really thinking about the conversation, I wanted to come from a place of the work continues. I think that we live in a society, especially as millennials, that we're always kind of microwave success guys, right, and gals, where we put a little bit of work in and we want to see immediate results. But if I understand this work the way that history shows it, we're talking about 250 years of slavery, 90 years of Jim Crow, 60 years of separate but equal, 35 years of disparities within mortgages, within redlining. Across the board, there has been systemic levels of oppression that, quite frankly, aren't going to go away by a hashtag. So as we get started, I'm excited for the conversation. I'm excited to learn from y'all brothers. But I really want the audience to get to know you all. So X, I'm going to start with you. Tris, Yay. Can I call you Yay, baby? Can we keep it real?
Whatever it takes. Let's do
Hey,
it.
Christopher, man, I appreciate y'all boys. But X, can you just kind of give us a background, man, from childhood to where you are now in a matter of 30 seconds? Impossible.
By the river.
and share along with the purpose, man. Take your time, man. But let's get this intro going.
Yeah, man. My name's Xavier Ramey, Chief Executive Officer of a social impact consulting firm based here in Chicago. It's called Justice Informed. We were, small and lesser known. 2020 kind of catapulted our company onto a lot of people's radars as many people looked beyond their intentions around racial justice and gender justice and LGBTQ inclusion and looked at the realities of what it actually takes to build strategies, policies, infrastructure for that level of safety and ambition in our social society. So I've been super busy this year, but the path started a long time ago. My work comes out of what I always call the urgency of my identity. I'm a black man like y'all, cisgender heterosexual as well, so that creates a certain lens on my life. And growing up in the hood, west side of Chicago, K-Town section of North Lawndale, it gives you a certain lens. It's the 90s. It was the killing years.
Yeah.
It shapes how you experience life. And then you jump into, higher ed. Went to DePaul, got my degree in economics. And, I think there's a lot of goals that we can have in life. But at the end of the day, there's this, comma we have to put after our ambitions. But I was black. I was in the trading world. I was a commodities trader at the Mercantile Exchange.
Come on.
But I was black. And so my experience wasn't the same. I was on the board of directors for several nonprofits, but I was black. My experience was not the same. I went in and became a program officer managing multi-million-dollar portfolios, but I was the only black man in Chicago with that job at the time. My experience was always colored by my color. And at a certain point, I stopped looking at, chasing the mantle and chasing the trophies and the accolades and whatever my ambitions were. And I looked at, how do I change this comma? Wow. And so I went to the University of Chicago and was teaching social justice and running programs that sort of intersect at the point of business, government policy, and social theory. And then jumped out of that when Trump got elected and was like, I think I'm a little bit better as a soldier than as a professor or teacher. I need to get in the fight. And that's why I started my company. I knew I needed to do it myself because I kept seeing that I had a different, though many people shared the direction of my ambitions around racial equity and gender equity, they were like, yeah, we want people to be equal and all that. They didn't share the degree of urgency I had. Wow, yeah. And so I had to create an infrastructure that held the degree of perseverance, urgency, and expectation that I had, rather than the pace that other people wanted, the eventual introduction of me into a society I've already lived in to take. So it's been dope. It's been interesting. It's been hard. This year has been a lot. Being a black man and holding everybody else's experiences in 2020 is real tough, and especially leading a company while being black and trying to be in one of the hardest professions right now. But it's such a blessing. So that's a little bit about myself.
Yeah, man,
we proud of you,
appreciate
bro.
that, bro.
We proud.
Seriously.
Yeah, we
I know,
appreciate
I
your
love
work,
you.
bro. It's all love. Hey, well, Tristan, man, can you share with the people, man? Just kind of give us your background, like I said, childhood to current, and then of course, share some of your purpose behind
man.
the work.
Cool. Yeah. So Tristan Lewis, born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri. I've been in Chicago for about 6 years now. And I'm also the co-founder of a nonprofit called The Healing. Shout out to Andrew Smith, my other co-founder. I guess to kind of talk a little bit about the work from the healing standpoint, it was an organization that we started organically this year. As we all know, this year, especially for black men, there's just been a lot going on in terms of trauma. I mean, it started off with Kobe in January, and then, a few months after that, we went into a pandemic shutdown. A lot of brothers that I knew in my circle, single, at home by themselves, and just kind of going through a lot of mental duress. And then you add on top of that, some of the killings within the black community, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. It was just a lot of heaviness going on. And, really for us, the guys that I was kicking it with, really after the city opened back up and we were able to get back out into the parks, we started working out. And I noticed that the workouts were good, but it wasn't necessarily serving a purpose of actually like tapping into some of the trauma that the brothers had experienced. And I just had this random idea. I was like, yo, we should do yoga sessions and complement to the workouts that we're doing. And we kicked it off. First Sunday, was expecting about 10 guys, 20 brothers showed up. And, it was compelling for me because, I probably done yoga once or twice, back in the day, dating a shorty and trying to impress and going to class. And, I just remember that experience. I remember that experience as being like completely awkward because, when you think about being a black male going into spaces like that, you kind of feel alienated. And then also too, former athlete, you're trying to outperform everybody in there and it just doesn't jive. So I didn't realize the impact of like creating that space and how powerful it was. And really that those Sundays turned into, consecutive Sundays where we were getting together. We would process our traumas, our day-to-day stresses through yoga. And, naturally, organically, a community was built through that. And, Drew and I, we had a conversation about, we actually need to do something with this. We're realizing that we're able to create a space for black men to come, to be vulnerable, and to have conversations about things that are happening on a week-to-week basis, but also using this also as a medium to impact the community in Chicago. So we went ahead and we got our nonprofit, our 501c3, and that's our mission. Our mission is, not only to service black men, but also create avenues of healing for underserved communities within the Chicagoland area. And, I would say this directly speaks to purpose for me because, I've grown up experiencing, some traumas with grief. I lost both my parents when, I was 11 and 12 years old, had a difficult time transitioning, into a guardian household. And then, shortly after I graduated from college, I lost my sister. So I've had my bouts with, anxiety, depression, and grief. And I've realized the importance of, finding spaces where you can talk these traumas out and deal with them in a healthy way. And my heart's always been on that, but I never really had an avenue to create that space for other people. And organically, I really feel like it was the hand of God that created an opportunity in the midst of chaos this year, to really create a beautiful experience for other Black men here in the city. So we're really excited to continue this work and excited to be here amongst you fellas today too.
Yeah, man. Well, we appreciate you, bro.
Yes, sir.
And that's just the work, being in the space with other brothers, being able to practice yoga. Like 2019, we would have never thought like ever doing that, right?
It's not on the radar
at all. So that's power, bro. We'll get back to that in a bit. Christopher Crater, my man.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to hear your story, man. I would love to hear some of the past. I would love to hear the work. And of course, sharing some of that purpose as well.
Well, first and foremost is thank you for having me in this space to be able to learn and grow from some amazing brothers. I'm Chris Crater. I'm the Community Engagement Associate at the Obama Foundation. I get the brilliant and special honor of getting to learn and grow from some of our top community activists across the city, some of our top violence interrupters, some of our brilliant small business owners and non-for-profit leaders and faith-based organizations and school administrations. So I get to learn and grow every day. I am a kid from the west side of Chicago.
West side?
North Lawndale in the building.
North Lawndale?
Now, I'm from the Holy City side, though, so he from
Me
the
too.
K-Town side. I'm from the other side. But no.
Sort of?
But being a kid who, similar to Tristan, lost his mom at 13, right? Pivotal moment. Like, what do you do? I started to veer off, but luckily I had so many people that were intentional about making sure this young Black kid had an opportunity to make it, this young Black man. Getting an opportunity to go to a HBCU in Mississippi Valley State University, finding myself, getting an opportunity and privilege of going to grad school. I was faced with out, right? Depending on where you come from in Chicago, if you make it out, you usually don't come back, right?
That's real.
So I'm at a pivotal point where I get to go. And I'll never forget, I'm literally in my lecture hall. I'm a week away from graduating from grad school. And the TV turns on. CNN, 2012, violence in Chicago. Everybody in the lecture hall, when CNN turns on, turns around and looks at me. And they say, you brag so much about your city. But this is not what I see on the TV, though. Wow. You talk highly about where you're from. Yeah. But, the news tells us otherwise. Yeah. At that moment, I knew I couldn't take a fancy job somewhere else with no job opportunity or offer lined up. I decided to come back to Chicago. Yeah. And fortunately, I was able to, ironically, become an educator to learn and grow from Black and brown young men who truly changed and empowered my life. I found from burying 8 of them in my 5-year duration as a teacher that it's not normal and it's not okay. And we have to be that helping hand to be able to lend to our young men, to speak life into them, to let them know we love them, to let them know we see them, and we're going to hold them accountable. And if that means giving you a hug, or if that means me calling you, or if that means me driving you to college, walking you to college, whatever we got to do to be intentional about making sure you make it, we get you there. So right now, being a community engagement associate is so awesome to see so many community leaders and community organizations, of course, within the CDC guideline, they kept this work going. When you turn on the TV, we hear about our homicide rate, but there are so many people in this city that are intentional about impacting change. Yeah. And I would bet anybody, if they ever think that we're not doing the work, now I know a Diane Latiker, I know an Antonio Davis, I know Chris Lamarck, I know a Cynthia Williams. I know people that are not okay with that being the norm. We are an amazing city, and we're going to make it because we convene in spaces like this. So thankful to be here, brother.
Hey, man, I appreciate you, man. That was a perfect start. And what I wanted to do, was something that I've really been practicing is a form of intentionality of acknowledging people when you're in front of them. X, I think the first time we connected, it was me hosting the Prospanica event, and you spoke.
I remember that.
Did about a 7-minute, just tore the place down lecture, talking about the work, and it was my first time hearing diversity and inclusion talked about from a place of empowerment and, like you said, urgency. I wanted to put my shoes on and get running right alongside you at that very moment. So I thank you, because there's a lot of people talking about D&I now.
Tell me about it.
And you live it every single day, and I as another professional that is dedicated to the work, you inspire me. T, yeah, man. T, I think Chris and I spoke a little earlier, but I appreciate you introducing therapy in my life. The first healing session, everybody at the end was like, "Shay, hey, this is my therapist. I'm like, yo, these boys really go to therapy. I thought I didn't know we did that. You feel me? And my life's changed forever, and I appreciate you. Yay. Chris, man, I have a mentee right now in the city of Chicago, from your neighborhood. I had another mentee that I recently got in contact with, and he saw some pictures from the yoga session, and he saw you, and he says, man, I love Big Bro Chris. My mentee now, I love Big Bro Chris. I don't know if you will ever be able to see it, but your impact in those neighborhoods across this city, those kids revere you. And I appreciate you being a black male educator. I know there's not many of you.
There's not many.
And I appreciate that. So, fellas, man, as we continue, as we have this dialogue, what I wanted to kind of, preface and start the conversation is, in the midst of the times, as 2020 put us in our autonomy, what has this year taught you as a man? I'm opening it up to the floor.
I'll go ahead and kick it off. I think 2020 has taught me as a man that there is power in weakness. There's power in vulnerability.
Yeah.
And I think that the world landscape kind of set that up for us, right? With the world kind of at its boiling point, at a standstill to some degree. I'm sure a lot of people had plans, aspirations, dreams for this year. And I realized that a lot of how I was able to transition or pivot through that was by having a different perspective of really looking at this year and trying to see the fruit of what the world was actually giving us, and you can kind of say the world was at a breaking point to some degree. And I think it really caused me to evaluate where I was at and really be intentional about pursuing purpose during this time. I thought about it as the standpoint of hey, my commute time is cut down by an hour, so I got 2 hours back of my day going and coming from work. How can I at least use that time to get to know myself better? Wow. And through that came the opportunity to be able to do some of the work that Andrew and I are pursuing right now. So I would definitely say that that weakness and vulnerability was turned to a power to some degree. And then I would even complement that by saying learning personal vulnerability and exposing our hurts and our wounds amongst each other as brothers, which is something that we don't typically do. There's power in that as well, as you were saying about therapy. I feel like we were able to use some of those weak points that we had in our life to normalize finding a better outcome, to normalize healing. And I think that that's something that I'm going to take going forward is, whenever I'm going through something personal, not necessarily being closed off, having a conversation about it, because you never know how, your pain may inspire somebody else to find a path to healing or find a path to getting better and taking care of themselves.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I see that, for me too. It was so external based, before the global pandemic. And the shift really, I think that quarter turn shift was everything started to become internal, right? Where I was, all right, is this person. Now it became, no, it's me. And there was so much good in that. Fellas, any other just learnings from this year?
Yeah, man. When the shelter in place kicked off back in March here in Chicago, I actually ended up going into a space that in my mind, I called it the dark room. I shut everything down. I shut business development down. I shut down hiring. I shut down everything. Told clients, hey, if you with us, you in. If you ain't already in, you ain't getting it. I did that because I have been feeling, and it had gotten to a boiling point where I realized that I have an incredibly deep understanding and capacity for societal love. I do not have the incredibly deep understanding and capacity for the experience of personal love. And side by side with that, I realized that much like I took this personality and leadership test when I was in the impact program at the Urban League, and it said that this person lacks ambition. Anybody who knows me would be like, who, what?
Yeah.
But, I take the good with the bad. I accept the good things that assessment said. I chased down trying to understand the things that I didn't like. And after about 5 or 6 months, I realized that I didn't have ambition. I had always been an effective follower of powerful people. Ambition requires a certain amount of choosing. As my father used to say, as a man, you have to choose in this world. You have to make a choice, and you live with your choice. You stand with your choice. I had not chosen anything. I had a bunch of people, I had jobs that recruited me. I look back and I was like, I ain't never actually applied for a job. People were like, this dude's dope. He's brilliant, yada, yada, yada. You should come over here with my choice. Come holler at my choice. This is my ambition. Join me in this thing, and you'll be dope doing this with me, and now we will grow us. I'd done that, and that's dope. If that's your lane, do your lane, play your part, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it got me to the point, much like where, that was building from 2014 when I first got that message, and it built up until March of this year, where I looked at Justice Informed, and I looked at my personal life, and I was like, all right, I'm turning 35 this year. I feel spent. Like, I feel totally spent. Everybody loves X, and I'm not cared for.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, I ain't got nobody to turn to if I really was really like to truly, truly deeply understand. There's a couple folks that do. Let me be real about that. But deep, committed relationship, the ability to deeply know myself and to not just, my apartment, my life, my job, my company, I've constructed this entire narrative around me.
Wow.
And so I went into, I was talking to my pastor, and he was like, hey man, there's consecration and sanctification. Before you jump into the big war, you got to be oriented back to what God is saying. You have to go into that dark space to listen. You got to close off those inroads of other people and ideas and new stuff. Close off anything that could distract you from his voice. And I chose to do that. And I spent probably 2-3 months in what I called the dark room. Just not really doing much of anything but listening and reading and praying and cooking again. And you know what I mean? Like walking around and stuff. And usually I got 80 calls a day and meetings. I didn't come out of the dark room. I just left. And this year I've learned also that, as it says, right, endurance is how you win. Not the strength, not the speed, it's endurance. I gave it 70%. I gave it 70%. And that's where I'm at now, as we're still in 2020. I'm looking at it saying, all right, recommit back, finish your job, finish what you started, and look at all that you benefited from. I wouldn't have been ready for June when George Floyd was killed. And I felt like the whole city was looking at me. And I'm like, okay, people ain't never protested. We got to get them on the streets, keep them safe. Police is popping off. Mayor's office is calling. All of this kind of stuff is just all in my space. If I didn't have that emotional readiness from that 70% that I got out of the dark room, man, I would have burned out this year by July.
Wow.
So recommit to the healing that comes from stepping away from other people's directions, desires, and ambitions and into your own choices, ambitions, and God's direction. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot this year.
Man, powerful, man. I mean, the intimacy of the autonomy, the proximity to your very being, right? And I thought so much about, you know, I feel like I thought so much about me was, wow, man, you know, I get my energy from other people, right? So I need to be around. And then when I like got into that space, similar to you, man, I didn't characterize it as a dark room, but I knew I needed to get within. And I just started to learn and unlearn about myself in a way that I think is going to be transformative for the rest of my years. So man, I appreciate you sharing that. That's so powerful. So as we shift, you know, and I definitely want to, you know, come back to you, Chris. But as we shift and we start to look at a macro level, you know, the city that Tristan and I are transplants in, but we care deeply about. A city that Chris, X, you all are from the same neighborhood. You brothers are some of the most polished, powerful men that I know in this city. As I was thinking about the time that we were going to spend together, I did some self-reflecting. And I went back to Dallas, Texas. And I went back to a lot of the times when, you know, sometimes when I'm asked to speak back home or wherever, I think a lot of times it's like, man, look at Nosa, look what he became, look what you can become. And I don't mind that from a visibility standpoint. But I always want to make sure the young boys specifically, but the young black boys and the young black girls know that, man, I'm so blessed. Few interactions this way would have put me in a completely different position. That's right. I would not be here standing here today, boys, sitting here today, if it wasn't by the grace of God, personally. But for me, like when I think about my past and how I got here, I see those moments, those pivotal moments that if they went one way this way, it's a wrap. I'm not here. So yeah, man. I guess like, you know, looking back in reflection, you know, we talked about the Other Westmore earlier, you know, and the story of his story, which is a magnificent book. If you haven't read it, The Other Westmore is one of my favorite reads of all time. The New York Times bestselling author Westmore kind of talks about his life and another kid by the name Westmore, and how the other Westmore ended up in prison for the rest of his life due to committing a crime. Same neighborhood, born the same year, and he ended up a Rhodes Scholar. Right? And what he said was, he said that the disheartening truth is that the other Westmore could have been me. Right? But the tragedy is that one wrong mistake and I could have been him. Come on. You know, so from your perspective, man, as you've navigated, as you've grown up, man, how has that showed up for you in your world, man, and the work that you do now, and how you're able to meet these moments with such compassion and reverence? You know, can you speak to your youth, man, and how you've evolved into the person that we see today?
Yes, sir. Wow, it's deep. And I also, before I get started, I want to reference what we talked about too, right? So for those that don't know, me and X, right, we go to the same barbershop, right, for years, right?
Shout out to Hair Castle.
Shout out to Hair Castle. Shout out
go.
to Navi. Shout out to Buck.
Easy.
They got us in here today, right?
Easy.
I used to get my hair cut before X, right? My barber was intentional about always whispering in my ear before I get out the chair. He said, that brother right there, he cold just like you, right? He didn't exactly know how to connect us at the time, but he knew that there was something unique and different about us both. And he thought that we should know each other. Now, of course, me, being like, okay, he cool, he do what he do, I do what I do. I'll meet him later on and like whatever, right? We can no longer do that anymore. Like, I'm so grateful to Navi, bro. He told me that at least 4 or 5 times before I got out the chair to you to get in the chair. He says, bro, you need to, like, buddy, he cold just like you. He went to college like you, right? And that is so pivotal when you think about North Lawndale. But we even think about Hair Castle, right? There's probably been over 35 brothers under the age of 40 that are no longer here from either drug overdose, from either getting shot and killed, from alcoholism, right? Like, he knew I might not be the particular person that can connect you, but you need to be connected to him. And with that, I'm so grateful last year for Chicago Ideas, me being able to take 20 of my young, black, intelligent young men. And I got to tell them, like, man, I know that brother. He from where I'm from. He from North Lawndale. And so grateful for you. So I wasn't able to tell you then, but I can tell you now, black man, I appreciate you. And I appreciate Navi Copeland for putting that in my ear.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.
When I think about, how easy it is, I remember my first time getting pulled over by the police, being a bigger young man, 13. I'll never forget it. I'm leaving out of the church, matter of fact, right, on Congress and Homan, and they pulled me over. It's 4 or 5 squad cars, and I got my hands up, my heart beating so fast, and I'll never forget what the unmarked car, I'll never forget what the cop said. He was like, where you from? I said, I'm from 2 or 3 blocks away from here. And he said, you've never been pulled over before? And I said, no, sir. He said, really? How old are you? I said, I'm 13. He said, you should be used to it by now, right? Like, he felt like he hadn't done his job already because I didn't know the routine. In North Lawndale, the routine is like, when I pull over, now I'm probably about to get put in these handcuffs, and I should be used to it. And eventually, if no one talks to us, right, if no one says, like, nah, that's not right, eventually, we buy into that, and we say, you know what? Nah, I am that savage. I am dangerous. I'm important to my guys, but, external facing, people will fear me, and I'm okay with that. Navigating that North Lawndale life was hard in the fact that my mother passed. It was the reason for me to say, you know what? I want to know everything that she's been hiding me from. Growing up, it was kind of like 2 situations. Either you were a young person who went to like church and school and back in the house, or either your parents just let you kind of be out all day. Yeah. And I had a lot of friends who just didn't have that love and support that I did. Fortunately, like I said, everybody around me was intentional about me making it. But that imposter syndrome within the black and brown community is so significant. My senior year in high school, I sabotaged my whole year. I got suspended multiple times. I even literally, tried to just, jot down stuff on the ACT just so I could prove that I wasn't smart enough to go. My family still got me into college. They still made me go. Yeah. And that first year of college was so tough because I said, I'm here in luxury. I'm getting to learn. I'm getting to, meet young ladies. I'm getting to learn who I am as a person. I get to enjoy life. And I have friends back in North Lawndale that are dodging bullets every day. It was tough. But something from freshman year to sophomore year let me know how intentional the people around me were for me making it. When you come back home and you literally see the same thing before you left. You see that guy that was standing on the corner, he's literally standing across the street now, but he's doing the same exact thing years later. So when I think about now, I'm just encouraged and intentional about letting my young men particularly know that it takes a village. It takes everybody. And we have to be open enough to share our problems and our insecurities and our fears and our shortcomings. It's the only way we get a place of healing, as Tristan has been significant for me this year.
That's beautiful, bro. You know, I love every aspect of that. You know, and it really hits into, you know, the meat of our conversation, because I think when we think about this work and we think about bringing forth social change to 400 years of systemic oppression, I think in a lot of ways it's really easy for us to say, okay, what are these people? What are corporations doing? What is X doing? Right? What is this celebrity doing? Right? And I found myself trying to figure out, what was my role? How was I going to lead the change within my sphere of influence to bring forth this change? And then I came to a stark reality that, man, there's pushback as we progress. That not everybody wants to see equity. Not everybody wants to see a leveled playing field that never started leveled in the first place. Not everybody wants to see us progress into boards, into the C-suite, into Forbes 500 companies, right? So, Tristan, from your perspective, as we are moving forward and to X's point, it's going to be a marathon. How, as leaders, how do we really lead this work from a place of empowerment internally so we can empower others externally? What's your thoughts?
Man, that's a heavy question, bro.
Light work. Take care of that, boy. Better take care of that.
Baby. I know you're gonna crush it.
Nah, man, I think that's a great question. Breanne Brown, she I was actually listening to a audiobook from her, and she talks about it, man. You know, in order for us to actually cause external change, we gotta make sure we're taking care of ourselves.
Wow, yeah.
You know, and I think empowerment, as we want to see it in the world, actually starts with, I think, having a real dialogue, self-dialogue with what we need.
Wow.
And the work that we need to do on ourselves. And then understanding that there's really no destination in that. You know, I think there's benchmarks along the way, but we gotta be committed to this work for life, you know? And I think that's where the dialogue starts, man. And I think you know, aside from that, we have to have some very honest conversations about what we need, and not being afraid to tell the people that are close to us, you know, what we need in those moments as well. You know, and I think, honestly, I think that's where empowerment starts. We got to start by taking care of ourselves before we can actually cause that external change.
Yeah.
Can I hop in
Of
on
course, definitely.
Yeah. The tactics of masculinity, particularly black masculinity, and I say that because masculinity is a very specific thing that nowadays is a big conversation.
Definitely.
Not necessarily because I think people are curious about masculinity, more so they are not in favor of what it has produced. So it is creating this desire for introspection. The challenge of demanding introspection is thinking requires some level of guidance and practice. You have to practice knowing how to see yourself, right? Like the whole notion of, I mean, even biblically, right? Where it's like people have ears to hear, they hear not. They have eyes to see, they see not. But if they had a heart to consider, it would open up these other sides. This goes back to what you were saying. You may fight for equity, you may work for equity, you may want equity, but the reality of the work, the reality of it is that everyone may not even choose it, may not even want to hear about it, because what they would like to choose for their life is in contradiction to the goals you have. Circle that back to what you were saying. What's the inner work that produces the value of the outer work? It's all the same thing in my mind. The answers that people refuse to answer, the questions that people refuse to answer as it relates to what all this is about, which is self-love, communal love, civic love, spiritual love, etc. It's about love. It's the question of the value and the potency and the power and the effect of the relationships we're supposed to be having with others out of the power of the relationship we have with ourselves.
Wow, yeah.
And that disconnect, because there's not many of us, I mean, who taught you how to love? I don't mean like who told you to love, who taught you how? Because everybody told me to go love some woman.
Yeah.
They didn't even ask if I was gay. I'm not gay, but they never even asked.
Yeah.
My earliest memories of not having a girlfriend for years was my brothers telling me, if you are gay, I'm going to beat you up.
Yeah.
I was in musical theater.
Yeah.
I was in poetry, slam, and all of this kind of stuff. I had none of the trappings of traditional masculinity. And so the experience of masculinity that I grew up in was what today we have the privilege of words. Like language creates light in the dark. I often tell my clients, like, the reason why you mad is because you get taking punches in the dark. My job is to create words for you. It's just like a doctor. You, oh, that's a cold. That's a cold. Now you feel a little bit better because you feel that you know something about what's happening to you. Oh, now this is how we deal with that thing. You have to name the thing. You have to name the demon. You have to name it before you can shackle it.
Yeah.
People are trying to jump and skip steps. They're not doing the inner work. So they have no external effect. Like an elder who demands respect and has not gone to war. They have no wisdom.
Yeah.
They haven't used their energy. They demand respect on the basis of time, but time only creates a probability of wisdom. It doesn't create the guarantee of it. You didn't use your time.
Experience. Wow.
So this is where it goes back to the futility of looking at titles, whether it be man, masculinity, elder, CEO, whatever it is. Your title means nothing in the face of you did not apply in the time you had to receive what could be gotten in that time. And now you're stepping into the hierarchy of our world, the flesh, in a conversation that starts in the spirit, love, relationship, endearment, connection, family, etc.
Wow.
It creates these ripples throughout the world of violence when we don't do that inner work. And so I would say that the outer work should look the same as the inner work.
Wow.
Name your demons before you try to shackle them.
Mhm.
Don't put the word out there, I'm going to go do this, I'm going to go do that. Book of James says that. Don't even say that.
Yeah.
Say, Lord willing, I will.
Come on.
Right? It's the question of, are you willing to consider? But again, going back to this guide point,
Yeah.
man, nobody ever taught me how to love. I broke hearts till I figured out that I didn't know, not till I figured out how to.
Wow.
I broke hearts till I figured out I didn't know how.
Yeah. Yeah.
This goes back to the question of are women or our men, whoever your romantic partner is that person your proving ground? Are they your school?
Yeah.
And should they be your teacher? Because there's an expense incurred when you
100%.
learn because of another person's life,
Yeah.
absorbing the violence of your ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the guide? Where are the guides? It requires us to go back, like way back to the question of what is the purpose of us being here?
Yeah.
Is it to gain? Is it to accumulate? Capitalism will give you a great guide for that.
Yeah.
Is it to be great? Is it to be mighty? Influence of culture will give you a great guide for that. Is it to have your name recognized? Is it to have title?
Yeah.
Well, just go up the ladder.
100%.
You broken up the ladder. You broken in the church. You broken in your house.
Yeah.
You broken in your spirit.
Yeah.
You have no idea who you are, and you're thrashing into learning that you don't know.
Wow.
I think at a core level, this is for men, women, LGBTQ folks, non-binary, trans, whoever you are.
Yeah.
Until you know who you are, you have no ability to do anything powerfully.
Wow.
No ability.
X, man. Yeah. From a place of love, from a place of empowerment. You can't empower people without first empowering yourself. Empowered people empower
people. It takes a testimony.
People.
Nobody believes words. They believe experience. They believe
Yeah.
blood. This is humans we talking about.
Yeah.
George Floyd was a testimony.
Yeah.
White folks didn't believe it was bad for us. They needed blood.
Wow.
Christians didn't. Believers didn't believe God was enough.
Yeah.
They needed blood.
Wow.
So then what is leadership? Understanding that it requires a sacrifice to be loved. The prophet is not welcome in their hometown.
Yeah.
You're going to be rejected when you live equity, not when you say equity. You'll be rejected when you try to connect with young people and then go back downtown. Because now you're bringing downtown uptown.
Come on.
And downtown pants ain't hanging like uptown pants. You know what I'm saying? Like why aren't you more like me?
Yeah.
They'll say. As they're saying, how can we bring more of something that's not us? That's the problem of diversity right now. It's like, how do we attract more women into a bad relationship rather than going to therapy?
Wow.
That's the diversity industry right now.
Yeah. So how do we stop? How do we
stop? Dark room, brother.
Yeah.
Any costs. All my revenues.
Yeah.
All of them.
Yeah.
All my hiring plans, all my strategies, everything. Everything. You have to be willing to stop. Get up, God, and knock you off your horse. Get swallowed up by a whale. Check this flood, baby. Like you got to chill out, bro.
For sure.
You got to chill out. And the last thing you want is for God to chase you down to do it.
And it hits me and it hits to the core. You know, I think during quarantine, I've and it's crazy because your story is in a lot of ways similar to mine, but mine came in a different way, in a different way, right? I come from sports, right? This hyper masculinity space where in the locker room we're either talking about ball or we're talking about women. We're not talking about them in the right way. And it was, quite frankly, all I've ever known. And I went from hurting until I said I had to stop, take a step back and say, yo, it's not these other individuals, it's me. And then I found the fact that the love that I was so seeking outside externally, it was the love that I was refusing to give myself. And it starts with love. That is so powerful, bro.
But you had an epiphany.
Yeah.
The epiphany had a cost. This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I got to double down on that point, man.
Please.
Where does the journey of self-love begin? It's a very broad idea. But like if you've never been taught that before,
you ain't got no guide.
You don't have any guide. Like where does that process begin?
That's what I'm saying. When you don't, that's why I was saying we need guides because this is the same thing, right, with the Bible, right? God says the law is a curse. It's better to live under grace. But the law is direction. So the direction's a curse. The police are a curse. Why can't we love one another without needing a gun? To police our agreements to respect one another. I say defund the police. They say, how you going to do that if we don't love each other first? We need guns for us, not for them. It's this challenge, right? That it requires our volition. It requires our commitments to one another for us to say we do not demand the violence. Like it requires us to commit to one another. The self-love, the journey, the guide, so to speak, the guide is the grace because the only other option is to learn by experience, and that experience is always toil and turmoil. That's what I'm saying. Like, why did it take George Floyd? Why wasn't Mike Brown enough? Why wasn't he dead enough? That didn't teach the white folks. If Mike Brown didn't teach him, how come Harriet couldn't teach him? How come Frederick couldn't teach him? How come the whole Amistad ship couldn't teach him? How come the whole Root saga wouldn't teach him? They demand blood to learn, to even consider whether they love. We do the same thing. That is a human thing. That is not a white, black, whatever. Everyone demands love where they refuse guidance. But if you don't have guidance, you often default to violence. Because you lack guidance. And at some point, there's an epiphany where the cost of your lack of knowing cries out from your heart. Because you see that you're now able to see, man, you said it. I went from hurting to hurting to hurt. You weren't talking about you. You talking about you hurting other people, right?
Yeah, of course.
You were hurting this person and that person and that person and that person and that person. Mike Brown wasn't enough. Tamir Rice wasn't enough. You see what I'm saying?
Wow,
George Floyd wasn't enough. Who's next?
Wow.
Who's next?
Wow.
So then at what point do you stop and say, it doesn't matter what I want. It matters who I become.
That's it.
I need a guide. I need to stop, slow it down, simmer it down. Stop talking about coming up on this business. Stop looking at Gary Vee. Stop trying to act like I'm TD
100%.
Jakes. Stop. Slow your butt down. Go in the house. And think through. Find the people who are centered. And don't judge the way they got there. And don't judge how it sounds when they're saying what they're saying when they're saying go to yoga. Don't judge the path you haven't gone down. Don't prescriptively say that this cannot be my guide as you're looking for a guide because you ain't even got one. Wow. Like a lot of us shut down wisdom because we're only used to understanding. Understanding is the context for the time, but wisdom is the truth for all of it. So it's like TikTok in 1840 is understanding. It means a clock. Don't mean a damn thing in 2020. TikTok is an app now. That's why old folks be irrelevant. Yeah. TikTok, that's a clock. No, it's not. They have an understanding, no wisdom. Wow. They're now rejecting guidance. Yeah. And they're accepting the violence of being separated from the people now. Wow. They feel obsolete. Wow. Everything is everything, y'all. Yeah. It's all the same thing.
It's so interconnected. And it's I think that we try to portray it as there's dichotomies. I don't need to worry about myself. I need to worry about how my people can get ahead. But what you said, but in the same light, what you said was so powerful, because I've been getting ready for this marathon next year. I ran a half this year.
Actual marathon.
I don't know how I'm gonna do it.
You got big legs, bro.
I got
you got
these,
the thighs.
you got
my
sister said,
what kind of shorts you got, bro?
Trust me, they rub together. And mile 9, it gets painful.
Big thighs save lives, right?
Hey, man. But I'm getting better, right? And I'm reading, I'm researching, right? And they talked about in this article that I read that 30% of the marathon, right, the 26.2 is physical. It's the body, right? 70%. T, you ran one. 70% is training the mind, right? So as we look, right, the marathon continues, right? Rest in peace, Nip. As we understand that this work is going to continue to keep going, as we know that we want to bring forth a change, the mental piece is so important. So as we continue on this topic, Chris, I send it to you. You know, for you, what's one thing that you've, in the midst of this work, as you've continued to find more ways to impact, what have you unlearned?
Wow, that's a powerful question. I would probably say the biggest thing that I've unlearned is that, you know what, I'll go this way with it. The biggest thing I unlearned is that we don't have time to wait. That a lot of times the assumption is, you know what, I don't got to fix it. You know, X will come along and do it. Tia do it. Yeah. Nah, right now, we have to be intentional about everybody playing their part.
Wow.
We can no longer wait. You know, like we think about a young man in 2000, right? He's on the corner. He has his pants down. He's got the, stop snitching shirt on. And that elder, what do, right? They look at him. They're like, man, look, he should be ashamed of himself, right? Because I was that boy on the corner with the stop snitching shirt on, right? But until somebody comes up to you, until somebody brings you in and says, you know what, like, man, I'd love to buy you a belt. You know what, I like your outfit, but man, let's put you on some slacks and a blazer, right? We can no longer go under the pretenses that it's someone else's problem, right? Them and they are actually us, right? Like in this work, having the opportunity to, work with Diane Lattiker and Roseland, doing a Thanksgiving turkey giveaway and seeing the smiles on her face of, her passing out and being able to contribute how she does. So just gracefully and just comes from a place of compassion, but also in the line of work going to Natalie Wallace, a 7-year-old that was shot and killed in Austin, 4th of July weekend, going to that funeral, right? Those are two totally different ends of the spectrum, but they're both equally important. It was important to let that family know that if one of our young people is shot and killed, it affects us all, though, right? Like, we are in the 700s this year, and I've had the unfortunate duty of going to 7 funerals for young people under the age of 10, and I will never make that the norm. That's not us. That's not what Chicago is about. Yeah. But the biggest thing I've learned from going from Austin to Roseland is that I am oftentimes disappointed in how we're portrayed, but I could never be defeated. We have so many powerful people working to impact change.
Yeah.
You know, like obviously, the news don't talk that much about it, about the great people here that are doing the work, but it's happening though. Wow. So when we see an issue, man, we got to tap into it because it's our issue too.
Yeah.
It affects us too. And when we realize them and they is actually us, we create a better community and a better city.
Yeah.
We got to do it now though.
Definitely.
Like out of those 700, like almost 600 look like me and you. Right?
Yeah.
It's a problem, man.
Yeah.
That bothers me. And until we address that, we got work to do.
Definitely.
Unlearn individualism.
Yeah.
You gotta unlearn that.
Man, you know, in this city, you know, there's so much promise. You know, I go back down south quite a bit, and you know, everywhere I go in a lot of places, you know, when I'm having these conversations, I'm talking about my Chicago experience. It's always drastically different than the person that's watching Chicago on the news. As leaders in these communities, as the individuals that are going to lead change, when we start to talk about and when we start to do the work and the action behind it, for you individually, and I'm going to push this to X, for you individually, what have you seen as the biggest problem affecting the communities here in Chicago?
The biggest I think I always look at things as a push-pull.
For sure.
So I try to stay away from the polar sides of biggest and least.
Yeah.
And so I'll answer the question in my own context.
Definitely.
Chris has laid out and dropped how many names of people doing the work.
Yeah.
You just they coming off the top of your head, brother. Like, it's just, you know them. It's natural. You engage with them. Most transplants don't know the difference between Austin and Roseland, or even that they exist.
Come on.
They know the West Loop. Yeah. They know South Loop. Yeah. They don't know this city. They don't actually know the city. Most transplants don't know 77 neighborhoods. They know we got a 78th coming. When we're talking about the black experience in Chicago, we're talking about a people who are being divested and removed from a city. The work of being removed, the work of being violently expunged, requires a heart set to build. It also requires a mindset to endure. On the other side of that, the folks who don't have to deal with this experience we're talking about have to think of, what are you enduring? And why? And where does it come from? I think one of the biggest challenges here in Chicago, James Baldwin talks about it in his book, The Fire Next Time. He says, it is the innocence which constitutes the crime. He's talking about white supremacy. He's talking about all the things that can happen. He's like, from the policing and the jails, to the lack of jobs, the discrimination in the labor unions, the mistreatment of black women, the lack of hiring of black men, the caging of black bodies, the desecration of black boys, the erasure of black girls, the invisibilization of black gay people. That in the face of all of that, people can say, I didn't know. And that be sufficient a response to maintain their life and livelihood. That be seen as innocence in and of itself is a crime. It assumes no responsibility. To assume no responsibility requires no proximity. If you're proximate, if you can see the problem, there's something in there for you. Definitely. There's something in there for you. The problem partly is that we have so many people in this city building, trying, and we have so many people tearing down good work under the guise of innocence as they ride the divvy bikes, wait for the Hoxton to reopen, they can get a drink downstairs. Try to figure out when the next potluck is on Zoom, at least. They delegate and relegate responsibility to relationship, and that creates the violence that we're experiencing. And it is not that we are insufficient to create sovereignty, pathways, and prosperity in our community. It is that the rate of change and the rate of growth that we have is always being undermined by people who want to call us friend and will never call us neighbor, who live in this city. And when they don't fight for us in the workplaces, they remove the validity of their right to ever try to even call us friend. When they insist on buying homes in the West Loop, talking about property values and not understanding how that divestiture of the TIF funds that went to the new Wind Trust, whatever, actually took away from Roseland, it removes their ability to call us friend. They insist on not calling us neighbor. Their fate is not wrapped up in our fate. Black folks, people, period, always resist their cage. You ain't gonna find a human alive that doesn't resist its own capture. Yeah. You ain't gonna find any animal on earth, and we are also animals, that's just gonna lay down and take it. At some point, Chicago has to look up and say, what are they dealing with that we can't grow? What is the power of the thing they're facing? Not what is the benevolence of our desires to help. What is the power and the direction of the thing that they're facing that creates this generational experience of poverty and violence and jailing and lack of jobs and these sorts of things? What are they up against actually? What that would require is that people let us define what the harm is. And every time we try to say this is that, they be like, no, it's not. We just need another nonprofit program. No, it's not. I gave back in your neighborhood. No, it's not. They remove our ability to even define the terms or the definitions of the experience we're having. When I say remove, it sounds as if I'm saying they're the only, like they control it. They, who the hell is they? Like, is it white people? Is it brown people? Is it the politicians? Is it the rich folks? Possibility exists within the limits of the ambitions and fears of people who have power over you. Wow. Possibility is in between there, the ambitions and the fears. Just like your boss, you got a boss, they scared of something, they're going to tell you, don't try that project. If they're ambitious about something, they're going to say, use your time on the payroll to get that done. And so all of the possibility, and every entrepreneur, everybody who steps out knows when they step on that limb, the skinny branches of doing it yourself, you know that you're taking on the consequences of your truth. That you see different possibilities because you have different ambitions and you don't share their fears. We have certain fears in the black communities. We also have certain ambitions. But there's this gag and this muzzle, and people are not being straight with us from City Hall and Mayor Lloyd Lightfoot all the way down to the other politicians we have on the city council, the ones that voted, for instance, for that crap budget that just passed, to the people who disregarded our calls for reform even when we work with police to go across the aisle to identify the specific areas of use of force that need to be stripped out of the police manuals and put 155 recommendations on the table, and the chief of police dismisses 150 of them. And nothing happens, and the mayor says nothing about it. When 36,000 people respond to what they think the city budget should be, and 87% of them say we need to start to reduce some of the police budget. We need to start to reinvest in our schools. Right now in North Lawndale, there's a conversation around closing 3 schools to reopen 1. I'm not saying that's good or bad because that's a community-derived strategy. But I am saying that we're still talking about closing schools on black sides rather than investing in 3. The city is propositioning it as a trade. This is what I'm saying. We're constantly trying to build. Chris going to have more names next year, new people who jumped in the fight. And ain't nobody going to ask what they're fighting against. They just going to clap for what they're doing. Rather than grieving the things that they're up against and knocking those things down. Some people get mad at me because they're like, why are you going into the white spaces? Why are you talking diversity, equity, inclusion? Why do you care about corporate social responsibility? Why don't you build in our community? Come back to the hood, like you were saying. At some point, you get the option to leave. I had the option to leave. I came back. Got my economics degree, came back to Lawndale, spent a bunch of years there, got whooped, got stole from, got all that stuff. I consider it no loss. I consider it all joy. I learned a lot. I used to rattle off names like you, and then I went upstream, and I'm like, nah, man. The violence is coming from up here. I need to run upstream because I got the gift of gab. And my homies don't know how to talk like this, and they let me in the room, and I put on a little suit, and they all cool with it, and I'm going to bring that same gangsterly 16th and Pulaski up in there.
Easy.
They won't be honest about what we're up against. They won't even name it. That's the biggest problem. They just celebrate the fact that we're trying to survive. And that's not what we should be focusing on.
Yeah.
We should be focusing on the thing trying to kill us.
Yeah. It's a generational defining moment when we start to really look at where we're at, what we're up against. And that was the perfect segue to where I really want to really put a button in on this conversation. As leaders, as black men, as we want to, and we aspire to lead households, lead companies, be in rooms that we have never been in. When we start talking about strategy, when we start talking about how does it look when we're having these conversations with individuals that don't look like us, that may not share the same interests, that quite frankly may not care or nor have the compassion to care about the problems that present to us and our people. How do we go about having those strategic conversations about bringing forth the change that we seek? So, X, I think you laid out a perfect plan, just the perfect synopsis of the cause. But as we try to bring forth
What's the move?
A movement, I want to hear from all three of you all in your own sphere of influence. How are you going about bringing forth the change that we all seek? I'll open up the floor.
I think one of the ways is sharing best practices, convening spaces like this, right? Like my barber told me for years that I should know X. But until I realized that me and this brother should have had a conversation years ago, right? Like we from the same place. We get our haircuts literally 20 minutes after each other, but we've never had a conversation until I bring my young men to the Chicago Ideas event. We got some powerful people, and we don't know each other. Like one of the biggest things I learned in this community work is that there are so many people doing great works. They're working so hard, and they're siloed in their neighborhoods. So it's hard for the champion to be able to say, all right, well, Zay, you're in Auburn Gresham. I'm in Inglewood. You know what? What works for you, right? They don't have time to do that. But, I'm in a unique space where I'm all across the city in several different capacities. So when I see a Chris Lamarck from Coffee, Hip Hop, and Mental Health doing great works, I have to connect him to Paving the Way Project and Antonio Davis, because those brothers are less than 10 miles away from each other. They're both doing great work. And guess what? We are stronger together. Everything that X talked about, right? We definitely, we have to have strategy from the top, from the bottom to the top, right? But we have to make sure that the powerful people that are doing the work are connected to each other, that they know each other, and that we convene spaces. We can disagree, but I have to hear your perspective. I have to know where you're coming from, so we can, we can do the deep dive. We can talk about, okay, where do we go from here, right? Like Tristan started a yoga group with Andrew that has ultimately resulted in 20 plus men, African American, black and brown men, getting therapy, bro. Yeah, that's a generational change in lives, right? Those are fathers, right? Those are sons. Those are brothers that are now intentional about becoming their best selves, so they can be better and they can pass on a better a life and generation to the ones that follow them. Like therapy is hard, bro, but it's necessary right now. Yeah, like as a black man, we have to take the deep dive on ourselves. We have to deal with our traumas. We have to work through it, and we have to share what's going on. Like I think I was most impactful in the classroom because I had to tell them, like, bro, when I went to Mississippi Valley State, I was a goofy. I had on a Pelly coat and a $1.50 hat. Yeah. Right? It's 70 degrees in Mississippi. Why I got a Pelly coat? but but because I wanted to take the West Side with me so much, because I was so proud of it. Like I wanted everybody to know, like, man, this is where I'm from. This is my culture. Yeah. It's important for me when I'm in that classroom. I had to show those like young men, like, bro, I get it. Yeah. But bro, you got to move a little different though, or you won't make it, bro. Because those young men that are still, like, they were getting killed in the early 2000s, bro, they still getting killed in 2020. Come on, man. We got to do something different, and we got to do it now. And it takes us. Yeah. So the fact that you put us in a room together, The fact that you recommended that I get therapy and the fact that you were so great that Navi told me I needed to talk to you lets me know that the synergy is real.
Yeah.
That we have to leave this conversation today and we got to talk to each other more, man.
Mm-hmm.
We got to text each other. We got to share deep ideas. Man, we got to do something in North Lawndale together.
Yeah.
For real. Like Sergeant Harris, he a police officer in North Lawndale, but bro, he's so dope though, bro. Every time I call him, he come. He helped me. And he need to know you. And I'm gonna hook it up though.
Yeah.
And I know it's rough, right? But we have to have the situations where we can be able to say, you know what? Nah, I know that there's some differences. I know, but we can no longer just sit in our silos, bro. We gotta work together, man. We gotta figure this out. So I'm appreciative and I thank you, man. Particularly you, bro. You've been big bro in our neighborhood and I didn't even know you. But Nabi thought enough of you to let me know, like, bro, you need the Buddy Cole. That's what he said, exact Buddy Cole. So
That's it, T.
Man, that's good.
Yeah.
I think the word that come to mind for me is urgency. And there's some themes that have been talked about here tonight. Urgency to do the work on yourself.
Yeah.
Understanding the impact that self-work can lead to. And I'm just sitting here across you brothers, meeting you for the first time. I know a little bit of Ye's story, but I know you guys had to come through some things. And I'm just thinking about if somebody wasn't urgent in terms of fostering an environment, opportunity to be able to get you guys above your circumstances, you wouldn't have the reach and impact that you have today. You know, so urgency doing the work for yourself, but I think also too, like looking for that opportunity to extend to the youth or to other people, other men in need who need a little prompting along the way. And then I would also say too, like in terms of making this an inclusive conversation, I know we're talking about black men, but I think there's a certain level of urgency in our spaces, our domains. You know, I think about an example of, you know, I worked at a tech company during the Philando Castile situation. This is right after the 4th of July break. And I can remember coming back to work and, you know, seeing the, you know, the black cohort in my organization all feeling the weight of what had happened that weekend. And I remember in the lunchroom, like seeing everybody else sharing stories about what happened, you know, over their July 4th break. And, you know, it was that moment where I didn't say anything to my white colleagues, but I realized the importance after the fact of letting them know my pain and actually taking a moment to educate them on the experience that I was having, you know, and getting to that in a more urgent sense because I was offended in a sense because I wanted you to see what I was going through. I wanted you to feel my experience, but they couldn't, you know. And I'm not saying that that's everybody's task to do, but I feel like some of us are called to be that intersection, that voice, you know, to be urgent enough to speak up in those moments.
Yeah, that's so good, man. You know, I remember after, you know, the George Floyd situation, the social unrest that that then happened after the fact, and my manager gave me a call. It's like, man, I saw everything that happened. He lives in the suburbs. I remember he's like, I saw everything that happened in the city this weekend. How are you? And I remember saying, you know, I'm good. And then, you know, going straight into business, right? And then I remember thinking to myself, like, nah, like, I'm not good. And at the end of the day, who am I to not let him know that? If I really want to be about this work. And I remember calling him back and saying, you know, Scott, I apologize, man. Like, I want to be honest with you. Like, today's been tough. You know, and he met me where he could. And I wasn't looking for anything in return, but I wanted him to see where my heart was. And I think that there's a level of understanding. It's not shared by everybody, but there is a level of understanding that if there is understanding, that the understanding will then lead to the empathy. And there's empathy that's needed to do this work and do this work well. So X, like for you, when you start to think about the advocate, when we start to talk about the individuals that are listening to this conversation and say, hey, you know, I don't identify as African American, but I want to be a part of the work. I want to figure out how I can leverage my privilege, how I can leverage my resource, how I can leverage everything that I am in order for this change to take place too. What would you tell them tactically that they can do to help us bring forth this change?
Well, first they have to be able to clearly identify what their privilege actually is.
Okay.
Your work starts where your privilege starts. I don't talk a lot about gun violence in Chicago. Y'all hear me talking a lot about policing. You hear me talking a lot about LGBTQ inclusion. You hear me talking a lot about women's rights. And that's because I have privileges in all those spaces. That's where my work starts, advocating in that way. I've identified that. I've clearly identified. It means I take some flack from the boys in the hood. But they be, how come you don't be talking about all these kids killing the kids? I'm like, I ain't got no privilege there. I was one of the ones that barely didn't get shot.
Yeah. Well,
my work starts over here.
Yeah.
One, be able to clearly identify your privilege. Secondly, they need to be able to know what their limits are of love.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, a lot of people agree with the direction you're trying to go in. They don't agree with the degrees you're willing to take.
Wow.
No knock. Like yesterday, President Obama made a statement about the defund the police movement. He said, these little slogans that people, he called them like catchy slogans that they get people off track. What he was evidencing was he disagreed with the degree of severity of language that people like myself and other people who are actively participants in the Black Lives Matter movement, actively participants and advocates in the defund the police movements and the coalitions. He didn't agree with the degree, though he agrees with the direction.
Yeah.
In order for people like us to work together, we have to know whether he sees his compromise of agreeing to my degree of inertia and energy, to your point around urgency. Urgency is a form of respect to those people who have been harmed. That's a show of respect when you take something seriously. So when someone is saying, let's slow it down, or let's because we need more people to agree, you're saying, let's slow down the pace of resolving the need you have.
Yeah.
And it comes off as disrespect. That's part of the community engagement stuff. When politicians, folks, they don't, why are they protesting me? I'm with you. Yeah. They agree with your direction, homie. They don't agree with your urgency.
Wow.
They don't agree with the degree of change. So I would say to those people who want to be advocates and allies and all of these sorts of things, whatever name they want to call themselves, know where your limit is. And just be honest about that. And don't be mad when people don't give you credit for stuff you're not willing to do.
Yeah.
Don't be upset. Don't say, well, they don't want help. They don't want progress. They do want progress. They just want it faster than you.
Wow.
Or you're just not. You don't have the stomach. Everybody don't lay down in the middle of the street and protest and do die-ins. Mm-hmm. I'll do a die-in. I'll lay down in the middle of the street. I remember my brother called me. I saw you on the news. You're laying down on the street, Michigan Avenue. They're gonna run over you, boy. Yeah. I'm outside 26 in California jail. My grandma called. You was on WJ. I saw you jumping around. You nappy head. What you doing out there, making the family look bad?
Yeah.
They don't agree with the degree.
Yeah.
They agree with the direction. How we gonna be friends? The Bible says this. How can two people walk together and not be in agreement? We don't agree.
Yeah.
So how do we reach consensus? What is our decision-making protocol?
Yeah.
Who matters more? I ask a lot of my clients this. Like people, they ask that question. It's like, yo, if the strategies my company suggests to you seem too ambitious, too forward, too fast, too risky for you, who gets to say whether you have to implement them or not? Is it you? Or is it the people who need them?
Wow.
Who gets to define impact? Those are the people who should define the pace, the people who need the pace to be faster.
Yeah.
That's what I would say to them.
Yeah.
Figure out not if you love, figure out where your love stops.
Wow, that's good. The capacity for it. Yeah. Well, fellas, we are coming up on a 90-minute time limit. This conversation has been wide ranging. I've been learning from each of you, and I appreciate that. I know we have some Q&A in the chat right now, and I do want to create some space and some openness for that before we close. So let's get a couple questions from the chat real quick.
First question that came in is around DEI stuff, so diversity, equity, inclusion. One of the audience members recognized that X shook his
All right. So, the question was in relation to the DEI work,
Diversity, equity, inclusion.
diversity, equity, and inclusion. And in regards to diversity, equity, inclusion, when I mentioned it earlier, the question essentially said that X, of course, shook his head. And there is a lot of opinions in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Corporations that are saying Black Lives Matter and saying, that they are, of course, saying the statement, but they don't necessarily agree with the organization, whatever it is. When we start talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the work, what do we feel like is going wrong and is missing the boat?
Man, I wanna ask a question to answer that.
Okay.
It's the worst way to do it.
No, you're good.
When y'all go to work as Black men, what do you actually need? What do you need from that experience? You talked about it a little bit. Let's forget what DEI is. Forget what the industry is. What do you need?
I mean, I think personally, I need that environment to feel truly inclusive, like they say that it should be. I need a sense of humanity when things are happening in the outside world, for you not to see me or see the issues or the impact of what's happening in my community as a black or white thing, but as a humanity issue. That's what I need.
Yeah. I think for me, it's that you honor who I am and my experiences the way that I have to honor yours. And what I mean by that is there's certain ways that we have to come into the corporate environment, right? And I think that a lot of times when we start to, whether we call it code switching, whatever we want to call the term, right? There's ways in which we have to play the game. And we fully understand the game, how it needs to be played, but I don't know if that same understanding is then offered back to us. And I think that it can't just be a hashtag or a month of February when you want to understand me. It can't just be a social media post that you want to understand me. And I don't think when that understanding, because when it comes down to it, when we start to look at hiring, when we start to look at practices when it comes to elevating Black talent, we see these companies that are missing the boat. But they have the campaigns. They talk about it from a social media perspective. They talk about it saying that it's a core principle as far as diversity, equity, and inclusion. They're doing it with women, or I should say white women. But where are those practices when it comes to people of color and Blacks? And I think that because it's not truly honored, it's not truly understood, it will forever miss the boat until we start to really do the work of saying, okay, let me understand the power that Nosa brings to the table. And I think that by understanding it, they'll see the necessity of it.
The reason why we don't start with what's wrong with DEI is because it starts from an assumption that DEI is actually the methodology we need. The reason why I started and repositioned it and said, what do you need, is because that the need that is there should create the lens through which we see any avenues of repair and restoration. Instead of saying, I got some water, I got some water, I got some water, you should first say, yo, you thirsty? You showing up with water to somebody that ain't thirsty don't matter. That's DEI right now. People showing up with water for the wrong issue. Trainings don't get us to what you're talking about. Trainings, DEI trainings, are an unaccountable form of engagement in humanity. Why? Same reason that school is you can go to school for whatever you want. You ain't got to get a job in that. Yeah. You can sit through the DEI conversation all day. You ain't got to do anything you learned. And if the company doesn't have policies and practices that, one, track whether you understood what was there, secondly, put that into your actual performance review to ensure that it is a part of your job, and then third, have some level of accountability, meaning that there are standards here. There are standards. This is not an idea. This is a matter of humanity, as you said. But even the framework of business in America is not set up to respect the realities of humanity. It's set up to evidence and proliferate the realities of free market capitalism and profiteering. In fact, if humanity drives down your stock price, the board can be sued by the shareholders.
Wow.
In the same way that a police officer can be fired for being merciful, because mercy is not what the law is about. The law is about regulation.
Wow.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
You want humanity. The law is a curse. You want humanity. Diversity, equity, inclusion trainings are an unaccountable form of relationship that have nothing on the other side to hold the other person who should be learning more about you, something they should have already known if they're in America, and be able to do something about what they learned. There's no accountability.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I did this, because in this, I'm seen as a DEI expert.
Yeah.
And it ruffles my feathers a lot when people use that term. This year, it was when I started seeing people writing about it like that. And I was like, y'all, come on. Like, nah. Like, y'all, The facilitators, the 5,000 black people who started diversity, equity, inclusion firms this year, who are jumping into a field of work where they don't even know how to tell the difference. I'm talking about black folks now. The difference between reformist reforms and revolutionary reforms, where they themselves have racial fragility in speaking to executives. And like I said, you're teaching power what it can do. If the black person's scared of talking about race to the CEO, what you think the white person just learned they don't have to talk about? Race.
Yeah.
You're teaching power what it can do, and you look like what it should be, it should have already resolved. This is like Pharisees in the Bible.
Yeah.
They go out and do many and great things. They come back, I don't care. I say I don't know them. That standard, that word, that's not water. That doesn't get us to love. That's weak. That's shallow. That's ineffective. That's why I shake my head. Because I exist in a world, in a space where I'm always trying to get people to live more urgently. And I'm trying to get them to understand that the lack of urgency is not a matter of political expediency. It is demanding that other people endure torture and violence and the extraction of their resources while you try to figure out if you see them yet. That's why I'm shaking my head. The definitions are whack. They're weak.
Yeah.
And some of us are selling them.
Yeah. Wow. Man.
Blue magic.
Yeah. Easy.
That's what I'm trying to. It's like,
get it to the people.
It's like
man.
that. I'm trying to get that pure out on the street.
100%.
Yeah, man,
it's needed.
My shit up, man.
Yeah, it's needed. All right, we got another one.
The second question is, in this type of political environment, right? Politics and conversations about politics and political preferences delve into the workspace. What advice do you have for the viewers in terms of how you navigate those conversations right now?
All right, so the question was in regards to, the heightened politicized workspaces that we work in, and the societies, of course, that we live in. How do we navigate that, and how do we do it? In the as we look at bringing forth this work when we are so divided as a country. How does that work get done effectively?
Pulling back, y'all. I'm talking too much.
I mean, I'm gonna be very honest. I don't talk politics at work.
Yeah.
Because whether it's red or blue that's leading this country, the thing that I realize is we still gonna be left with the same problems. There's still gonna be the same work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
So for me, it's more so like looking at it from an angle of taking personal accountability and taking personal responsibility for the things that I know I can influence. And I don't really feel like me defending my political position is going to really make an impact or be an impactful conversation. So, yeah, I don't really have much to add to that.
No, you good. You good.
Yes.
Okay.
Because you may have to sit next to someone.
That's real.
Mm-hmm.
Work with a group.
Mm-hmm.
Or report to someone.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That who has voiced a different political opinion. How do you, in that situation, still get the work done, still show up respectfully,
Yeah.
still execute, even though you know that they're not
Yeah. So, how do we execute when we're working with people that have different political ideologies than us, that see things drastically different than we see it? How are we creating those healthy working relationships in the midst of that?
I mean, I think if we were ever in a moment in time where we could be able to express, right? Because when we think about other cultures, they are quick to express how they feel, if they're uncomfortable, if something's not right. I think we have to be honest and be able to speak up, and also if that means going up to the chain of command, if that means writing those emails that are so elaborate, if that means having those meetings, those one-on-ones. I mean, it has to happen now, right? Obviously, it's went on too long in a lot of different companies and organizations, but this is the time. I think if we don't say anything, we've done ourselves a disservice right now. Like, we have to say something.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I'm a bit on. I think I'm on the outskirts because I would disagree with. I would disagree with some of the positioning. I'm trying to make workspaces. I'm trying to create civic education workspaces in workplaces.
Yeah.
The personal is political. You think about it, as Dr. King said, right? If a white man wants to lynch me, that's his problem. If he has the right to lynch me, that's my problem.
Yeah.
He's alluding to this challenge around policy and practice.
Yeah.
You can try to evade politics all you want, but it showed up at your door. The things that are happening outside come inside a company. That's why we're having all of these rustlings now, because people never studied. What business school taught what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's part of the challenge. I think that there's a responsibility for every company to take on the active and proactive, I'll say, in encouragement and education for their workforce as it relates to issues of humanity, inhumanity, access and exclusion, history and the present, in ways that both affect their business and do not affect their business, but affect the people there in the business. And by not doing that, it creates the downstream challenges. The workplace conversation, and we don't have that a lot, not right now with COVID, but like the water cooler talks, the gossip kind of stuff. Y'all went into the meeting together, somebody talked over somebody else, and he always talks over her. All the hers he talks over. That sort of a thing, that turns into a workplace conversation. You got to know how to deal with that. Yes, that can be seen as interpersonal harm. The reality is that's also a systemic and a societal issue around the gender imbalances of language and power and access. We know this if you study anything around, you read the book Hood Feminism, right? You'll learn a lot about what it means to understand not only how women experience the workplace, but black and brown women experience the workplace, and secondarily looking at that through the lens of then what does that mean for a man? What does that mean for a cisgender heterosexual man differently than it does for an LGBTQ man?
Yeah.
What does it mean for a transgender man? Come on, people ain't this complex. Y'all know that.
Yeah.
I just rattled off all this stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, we 50 years before Northwestern starts teaching this and saying you got to have this as a base of knowledge to get our degree, to get the degree, right? Like, PricewaterhouseCoopers ain't trying to effectively vet out CEOs that can't say what I just said. They're trying to see, can you get this money?
Yeah.
And can you be inclusive?
Yeah.
Right? Like, this one's about standards and such. I would step away and say it's not political to talk about issues of humanity. It's political to talk about the negotiation of acts of inhumanity. The negotiation process is the work of political engagement. But the reality of what we're talking about, that's just humanity. That's just us. And I think that wherever us are, we have to be accounted for in those nuanced and appropriate ways.
Definitely. And it is a tough conversation to have.
It requires a learning that most people don't have. That's 100%. The problem.
Yeah, and it does, but when it's threatening against you, and it's threatening in a way that is directly against the values that you put in place, and people are emboldened by the policy to think that they can do things such as and take away from your dignity. It has to be spoke to in a way that is extremely difficult. I think more work needs to be done around that. I think we all can agree about that. Just providing more resources for individuals. But
But it's
it's
also
tough.
not everybody's fight. I just want to say that. Like,
Yeah.
people be, I mean, bro, if it ain't your fight, don't fight.
Mhm.
Like, but if you're not tuned in, you don't know if it is or if it isn't.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's too many people out there saying it isn't.
For sure.
There ain't no way this ain't nobody's fight.
Yeah. All right. We got one more question.
Last question. When you guys are going through tough days, when it's testing your will, testing your patience, those types of testing your strength, what are the words of wisdom do you tell yourselves that you may share with our guests to help you make it through those days and help you persevere, help you remain resilient?
Yeah. I love this question to end on.
I
So
wanna hear from this athlete right here. I want to hear what y'all
All that
be having all the
motivation.
mantras and stuff,
Man,
man.
I tell you
I'm
what.
listening.
So the question was, we've had a lot of them, but in the tough days, in the days that things aren't going right, in the weeks that quite frankly aren't going right. It's more than one day. It's like they're going back to back to back. What are some of the words, the mantras, the things that you share within yourself and you tell yourself to keep going? So, T. Yeah, like.
Man, that's good.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, for me personally, I think before I even get to any mantras or words, I got to recenter myself in practice and get myself in routine. Because typically if I'm operating in a place where I'm rattled or not where I should be centered, I realize something about my routine is off. And for me, that routine, is definitely first thing in the morning, waking up, spending time in the Word, because sometimes I don't have the words to tell myself to get myself back to center. So I got to have an anchor in something that is bigger than me.
That's so good.
My favorite verse, Romans 8:28, all things work for the good. And that's actually been like one of my verses for this year. Despite whatever circumstances that we face, I have to believe that there's a good outcome, even in the tough things, even in the uncomfortable things.
Yeah.
So I would say that's my base.
Mm-hmm.
But also you got to have a team. You got to have other systems in place. We talked a lot about therapy because sometimes, there are things that I feel like are spiritual where you take to God for revelation. And then there's also emotional and mental battles that you need an expert, somebody who is not a friend or a girlfriend who can, professionally speak to and give you some perspective on.
Most definitely.
So that's my process.
That's so good, bro. I love that.
Wow. So one thing that African proverb that I found this year, if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm.
Yeah, that's it.
If there's no enemy within,
Yeah.
the enemy outside can do us no harm.
Yeah.
So similar to what T said, right? It always brings me back to center. Like, how can I be my best self? How can I be intentional about speaking life?
Yeah.
But one of the things for me that always keeps me level and humble is thinking about the young people behind us. I think our dads and our granddads, they managed to, raise these families and to work so hard and to have to bottle up all these emotions and issues and fears and insecurities.
Yeah.
And we are the generation that will say it stops here.
Come on.
Like, we cannot break through this glass ceiling with all this baggage. We got to let it go.
Yeah.
We got to work through it. I know last week, one of my former students, young man, he just graduated from the Mississippi Valley State. So not only
Let's go.
did he go to my HBCU,
Come on.
right? Not only did he pledge my fraternity and my chapter, right? But he sent me a text. And he said, "Big bro, because you did, I can do."
Come on.
It's humbling. And, as many as I've sent to college, I'll never forget about the 8 that didn't make it. And that drives me every day.
Yeah.
Every day. I always think about those young men that didn't make it. And, people always hit me up like, "Bro, how you do it, bro?" Like, every day you smile and, you speak in life. Is because I know that could have easily been me. So, like I said, sometimes I'm often disappointed with a lot of outcomes when we turn on the TV, but I'm never defeated, though, because there's so many people here working to make this place better,
That's
man.
it.
So, you know, you shake it off, you keep going.
Yeah.
But man, if there's no if there's no enemy within, the enemy outside can do us no harm.
Yeah. We keep going.
We got to, bro.
Wow.
We got to, man. Tristan, thank you, bro. Therapy, bro. I'm dealing with stuff from when I was 13. You know, when I lost my mom. But it's like I'm letting it go. I have to.
Yeah.
I can't bring no son in the world with this pain. We can't do that no more, man.
That's it.
So thank you, big bro. Truly.
Yeah.
My favorite book of the Bible is James, and there's this verse that says, "Just consider it all joy."
Yeah, that's it.
When you find yourselves in times of trouble and challenge. The other one is, I remember my call, and I know that at a core level, I'm a teacher. And the book of James, it also says, "Not many of you should be teachers, for you should be held to a stricter standard."
Yeah.
The problem of teaching is you have to go before people, not like you're better than them, but you have to take the hit first, because they're only going to believe the testimony.
Yeah.
They're not going to believe the word. The word wasn't enough. It had to become flesh too.
Yeah.
So I have to, I think about, I was this year, how do you consider it joy? It requires that you believe there's something in here that you're missing.
Wow.
You're missing something.
Yeah.
And you start seeking it out like treasure. You start seeking joy out like treasure. And what I found is that you will find your joy. And joy is really what sustains me, man. If I sat down and did the accounting on what I'm carrying, and I just rested, I just sat in that, I would have offed myself a long time ago. I mean, it would have been real. I have dealt with, those types of challenges around suicidal thoughts and such. That was early in my life, and it took a level of recentering and God's grace, but also, to your point, practice. Right, like guidance, a guide. Right, like there's some tools here that you might not have that will help you. So mantras: consider it all joy, and remember that though you are a teacher, not many should.
Yeah.
And am I holding myself to the standard that is required for me to continue having a title, or even to see myself as a teacher?
Yeah.
And if I don't, like I did earlier this year, I pull myself out of the game until I get right.
And it's amazing, as we come to a close, that you say that, right? And I think that it's just beautiful, and it's so affirming to me to hear another strong black brother, right, that needed to take himself away, right, to find what was within and to strengthen what was within. I think like what you said was funny, right? I'm listening to the question, and X is like, "Man, you're a football player, man. No, so I know you got the mantras, right?" And I think
bad at sports. I don't know what they are.
and I think to be quite frank, I think I've mantraed myself for so long that I mantraed myself without ever doing the work.
Oh, that's like when people go to church for the music,
right? And it was always I was always great, at speaking as an orator. So I always had a way. Like my pastor always says, "No, so you're really good at selling yourself." Selling to yourself, right? And I'm in business development, man. That's what I do. And I think that now, I guess to come to a close, and Tristan, what you said was so amazing, is I'm shifting away from the mantras. The mantras are still there, right? When I think about Brene Brown, man, I know you mentioned her earlier, like a recent podcast in the book. She said strong back, open front, wild heart. And I've been selling it to myself recently, right? Like, can I be strong, right? But can I be open from a place of love? And then can I also like have that level of wanting to just desperately understand myself and others? But I think that for me, man, the practice, the tactical approach has been asking myself why. Why do I feel the way that I feel? Why did as I've been going and working with my therapist, why did that upset me the way that it did? Oh man, well, I've always externally validated myself. So of course, with that person not validating me, that's a problem. But as we shift, as I start to understand, man, I think that the goodness of my practice has been what I've been defining as empowerment, which I think the ingredients of empowerment is self-actualization, being able to say, okay, this is it, then self-correctiveness, and then grace. Wrapped together to be the empowered person that I get to walk into rooms and influence, but I can't influence anything without influencing myself. So, fellas, I'm so appreciative of this time. This hour and a half, 2 hours has flown by like crazy. I know we could have went a lot longer and a lot deeper, but I hope the depth was great for y'all, man. And I know just being able to listen and learn has been amazing. And I just want to say thank you. And I want to say that for each of you, however I can help, however I can be of service, I'm doing my work so I can make sure I show up for y'all. And I know that that's the way that this work is going to get done in a big way. So to our viewers, thank y'all so much for sticking with us. And this is the first Coffee Chat series. The work continues. And we will be back again. Thank you.